Hello, everybody. Let's talk about NLP anchoring. As soon as I make some adjustments here. All right. What is NLP anchoring? Keep watching because you're going to learn all about it in this video. Let's see if I got everything set up here. All right. Well, nothing's perfect. Okay. My name is Damon Cart, for those of you who don't know, and this is Life Mastery Gym. And we're going to talk about anchoring because it's really probably a really misunderstood technique in NLP, and it's also a very powerful technique in NLP. It's one of the signature techniques, been around for a long time. Not all NLP started at once. Some things were developed later. NLP anchoring has been around for quite a while. And it was basically, well, before I get into this, I should also say my practitioner training, the enrollment for it has just opened. So if you want to become an NLP practitioner or neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, the enrollment is now open, and it is, I call it the ultimate practitioner training because I spared nothing putting this training together. It is so granular and granular to big picture. I like I said, I spared nothing. I put so much work and effort into this, and there's some awesome bonuses that go along with it. One of the things that I found is that people are often attracted to NLP because of the persuasion and influence language patterns. And there's not a lot of times people get into a practitioner training and they're disappointed because there isn't a whole lot of focus on that. So I just created a training, or I'm working on creating a training specifically for that, called The Secrets of NLP Persuasion and Influencing at the Identity Level. And that's going to be available in about a month. And that's one of the bonuses with the program. So if you're interested in it, check the description. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, just check the description. There's a link there. You can check out what's being offered there. All right, so let's talk about anchoring. Now, some people say, "Oh, well, what you're talking about when I explain anchoring, they'll say, well, that's just classical conditioning." Okay, well, no one's saying it's not. I had a guy comment just recently. Oh, what he's talking about anchoring, that's just classical conditioning. That's Pavlov and Pavlov's dogs and all that. And that's Pavlov's dogs, and that whole experiment is often what, when we're teaching NLP, that we refer to so that we can help people understand what anchoring is to begin with. So there's no secret there. We're not trying to pretend like we figured this out before Pavlov did, or we beat Pavlov to the punch. None of that. I mean, Pavlov's experiment explains why anchoring works, basically. How the developers and founders of NLP came about coming up with this idea of anchoring was they were noticing when they were modeling Virginia Satir, Fritz Perls, and Milton Erickson that in some way, all three of them would use a way to sort of get people to go back into states that they were wanting them to go back into. And it could have been a problem state, it could have been a solution state or a resource state, but they would use this to help guide their clients and to affect the state that their clients were in. Sometimes they were using it with touch. Virginia Satir was really big with using touch. And then Milton Erickson would use his voice to anchor people, and words to anchor people. And then Fritz Perls would usually use positions. He would move chairs around, like Gestalt therapy, which you use in Gestalt therapy. So positioning, anchoring by location a lot of times. So they were all using it. I'm gonna adjust my camera here. So they were all using it in some form, and they started to notice this, and they thought, well, we can model this and we can use it. And that's basically what NLP is about. It's about modeling. It's finding solutions and ways that things work, and then extracting the structure of that, and then bringing it to the area where something's not working, and seeing if you get the results that you want. And you keep testing this until you do. So that's the whole connection to classical conditioning. The difference was basically it's taking the classical conditioning, and in a conversational setting, most of the time, not all of the time, you can set these anchors. and influence people that way, or you can influence your own states. And a lot of people know who Tony Robbins is. That's why I often refer to him. He's one of the probably, I'd say he's the most successful NLPer out there. And the majority of what he uses is NLP. And you'll see a lot of times he'll hit his chest and he'll sometimes do it multiple times, kind of like a alpha male. He's anchored. Those are his anchors. He'll hit his chest to fire off anchors. And then he'll often hit his hands like this. That's another anchor for him. So it triggers a state that he wants to be in, and he's pre-anchored these states so that he can decide when he wants to go into these states. And there's many types of anchoring. So there is the just classical anchor, which is you combine a sound, you combine a sight, or you combine a touch with some state that you're in, a heightened state. It's even more powerful if you combine two of those. So, for instance, if I'm anchoring someone, especially if I'm working with a client and I'm working one on one, a touch anchor is very very powerful. But I would also combine that touch anchor with a sound or a word. So if I notice they're going into a state or I'm directing them into a state that is resourceful for them, I might reach over and touch them and say in a lower tone, a distinct tone, yes. Now, if I just said "yeah" or something like that, they might hear that a lot throughout the day, and it might wear out the anchor. The good thing about having an auditory anchor as well is that I don't have to touch them. I can just say "yeah" in that tone, and they'll go back into that state. So the idea here is you have a heightened state, whether this is in yourself or in someone else, and you combine that state with some sort of sensory connection, a sensory something sensory combined with it, and that creates the anchor. So there's just a classical anchor like I just mentioned. You just combine it with one of those something sensory. It can just be one thing or it can be a combination. You can do auditory and kinesthetic or auditory and visual. A lot of times colors anchor people. If you see a certain color, if you see red, people think of anger. Doesn't necessarily send them into rage, but it just kind of shows you how colors can anchor. And then there's something called collapsing anchors, and this is often used in a therapeutic setting where a person will talk about a state that they're in, a stuck state, an unresourceful state, a limiting state, and then the NLPer would then ask, well, what's the opposite of that? So let's say I'm in a depressed state, and I would say, well, what's the opposite of being down? And they would say, well, being joyful. That's just an example. And then I would ask them, "Well, can you remember a time when you were joyful, like the last time you were really, really joyful?" And just by asking them that question, they have to go back and access that state to understand what I'm requesting of them. And so if I can really get them to step into that state, associate into that memory, they'll start to experience that joy. And then that's the time that I would set the anchor. And then I would let that go. And I might even test the anchor just to make sure, like have that person break state, think about something else, and then fire the anchor and see if that brings the state back. If it brings it back, then I know I'm successful. If it doesn't, then I know I need to set the anchor again. So from that point, I'll start to ask them again about their stuck state. And then as they start to explain it, which usually makes them go into that stuck state, I would fire their anchor, either touch or sound or both. And then what that would do is it would collapse that anchor. It would collapse the down anchor. So they're already anchored to the negative state. And then when I fire the other anchor, it would collapse that. Now some people go ahead and they anchor both. Like they would anchor the negative state to a touch, they would anchor then the positive state to a touch and then fire both at the same time. I don't usually find that is necessary. If I just fire the positive anchor while they're in the negative state, that usually works. Now, some people will say in NLP that, because the question will come up, well, what if the negative state is stronger than the positive state? Or what if the negative state takes over the positive state? And there's this idea among many NLPers, which I think is incorrect, that the positive state will always overcome the negative state. And that's just not true. If you have a very, very strong negative state and you don't have a very powerful positive anchor, that negative state or negative anchor could easily take over and So you got to make sure you have a state that you've anchored that's stronger than the negative state. So don't think that just because it's positive that it's going to work. It won't always. Then we have stacking anchors. You can anchor a positive state. Let's say you anchored it on the back of your hand, and the reason why the back of your hand would be good is because you don't often get touched here. If you get touched here, it's because of you. Now, if you anchor somewhere on your body where you get touched a lot, like say the inside of your hand, and you shake hands with people a lot, you can wear that anchor out, and maybe you don't want that anchor fired every time you shake hands with someone. So doing it on the back of your hand can be a better choice. So let's say I wanted a few states. I want to be joyful, and I want to be motivated, and I want to be, what's a good one? See, adventurous. So joyful, motivated, and adventurous. Three different states. I would go back into times when I experienced each one of these states, and each time I go into the state, anchor that, and then you can stack them on top of one another, so that this becomes like a super anchor. So when you press here, or I could even anchor myself or think of a word and do this all both at the same time, it would fire all those anchors at one time, and you'd have this sort of super power state. And so you can definitely stack those anchors. Like I mentioned, you can collapse anchors. You can also chain anchors. So the difference between stacking and chaining is, I know some people, they will do it on their knuckles. You see here. So they'll actually anchor each knuckle to a certain state, and then they'll practice hitting all the well, one at a time, hitting all the anchors. And then what will eventually happen is if they just press one, it usually fires off all of the others. So instead of it happening all at once, like the stacked anchor, it happens one after the other, sort of like a chain reaction. So it all depends on what you're wanting. If you want like a all at once sort of super state, or you want something that kind of moves you through several states at one time. What else do we have? Well, those are the main ones. There's also spatial anchors. So if you're having trouble anchoring yourself, I know I have a hard time anchoring myself, because when I go to create the anchor, like I have no problems getting myself into the state that I want to be in. But what happens is as soon as I'm in that state, I start to think, okay, time to anchor. And as soon as I think that, I disassociate from the state that I'm associated into, and it breaks that state before I can anchor it. And I know a lot of people have that trouble. And so there's one way to do that really easily, and that's if you grab your wrist gently and then start to go into the state by associating into a time when, and then as you go into that state, start to squeeze your wrist. And as you squeeze your wrist, that creates the anchor, and then you can let up. And what's good about that too, it kind of becomes like a, I don't know, like a motorcycle engine. The more you squeeze it, the more that state rises. So it's an interesting thing, and I found that this works really well for anchoring yourself. There's also you can stack anchors or combine anchors by making a fist when you do the anchor, and you can do it in two different hands. And then you can bring your hands together and do like that, and then this will create a nice stacked anchor, and it's a stacked anchor that you don't it's not always stacked, it's only stacked when you want it to be, because I can do this and fire off a state, I can do this and fire off a different state, and then if I wanna combine them, I can do that and fire off both states at the same time. There's also something called sliding anchors. When you have a sliding anchor, let's say, like, if I anchored the back of my hand, and typically, not always, everybody's a little bit different. If you slide this way, the anchor will increase. If you slide the opposite way, so like say if I anchored on the arm, actually I like anchoring on people's arms. So if I anchored here and I slide the anchor up, it usually increases the sensation. If I anchor here and I slide down, it usually decreases the sensation. So why would I want that? Well, you can do a nice collapse anchor on someone if you have a positive anchor that's above the elbow, and then you have a negative anchor that's below the elbow, a problem state, and then you fire both and you slide one up and one down at the same time. It's quite an experience when you do that. And this is something, in order to really learn it, the best way to really learn this is to have a lot of fun with it. It's just amazing how this type of conditioning just works so well, and you can shift from state to state really, really fast, and it feels really good too, especially if you're if you're overcoming some negative states. Now, real quickly, a way to anchor yourself in a different way. If you have trouble anchoring yourself, I found another way that works really well, and that's by anchoring on the floor. And this is more like the Fritz Perls Gestalt way. So you find places on the floor, one where your problem state is, and you can anchor that to the floor, and then another where there's a positive state with whatever resources you would need in the problem state to resolve the problem state. And then you can anchor to the floor that positive state and then step into, while you're in that state, step into the negative spot. And then it'll collapse that anchor if the positive state is stronger than the negative state. All right. So I just dumped a bunch of information on you really fast. All of this is in my practitioner training. We do a lot of anchoring. We do a lot of fun things with anchoring, and anchoring is it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much to NLP. There's the language patterns. There's all the processes, and like I said, the more fun you have with it, the more playful you are with it, the faster you learn it, and you'll want to keep learning it because you're enjoying it so much. I know I enjoy NLP. I mean, it's been my life for the past several years. And so, yeah, I never get tired of talking about it, never get tired of practicing it. And then it's like you're optimizing yourself at the same time. You're taking conditioning and you're making conditioning work for you. For most people, it's completely unconscious, and they fall into all of these limited negative states without even realizing it because it's all happening unconsciously. What NLP is about is getting conscious of all these processes, all of this conditioning, and then taking charge of it because you have all these unconscious processes and programming that's running you. There are more unconscious processes and programming that's running your life right now than are conscious. Trust me on this. So the more you learn NLP, the more you learn how to bring those unconscious processes into consciousness and then take charge of those programs so that you're running the programs instead of the programs running you. And this is why I always say that's why I refer to mastering NLP as mastering your life. It's taking charge of your life. It's mastering your destiny. So if you want to do that, then enroll in my practitioner training. Like I said, if you do it before or if you do it by Sunday, you're going to save $300 and you're going to get these awesome bonuses. Um, the main bonus that I'm working on now, which will be ready in about a month, like I said, is the persuasion and influence at the identity level. And then we have ongoing support, group coaching calls, and additional sensory acuity training. So get in on that. I'm going to check the questions here to see if anybody has any questions about anchoring or about the practitioner training. This is exactly the topic I've been waiting for someone to talk about. I mean, how to do it to yourself. Yeah, I know that was something that I struggled with for a while until I found some ways to make it work. Okay, anybody have any other questions before I get off? Um, Check out the practitioner training. And if you're watching this after the live, feel free to put comments down below. I'll get to those as well. How do you do floor anchoring? So you find spots on the floor, not too far from each other. And so you'd stand in one spot and you would, if this is your positive state, whatever the positive state is that you want to anchor, say creativity, that's a good one. So you want to anchor creativity. And maybe you're experiencing writer's block or you're experiencing some sort of block in creativity, then you would find a different spot on the floor and remember a time or remember the last time when you experienced that state, that block, or whatever it was, and those sensations come back up. And so now it's anchored to the floor. Then you step out of that spot and break the state. And so think about something completely different. And then step into the other spot and anchor the positive state. So being really creative. Remember a time when you were very, very creative and let those feelings and sensations come up. And then once you're in that state, then step into that negative state, the one that's blocked, and it should collapse it. And you don't always have to do collapse anchors when you're anchoring on the floor. There's something called the circle of excellence, which is a wonderful way to anchor yourself. And you use the floor, but you can also imagine taking that space anywhere you go. And this is pretty amazing. So you can walk into any situation and sort of throw down your circle of excellence in the room. Nobody has to know. And then you step into your circle of excellence when you're in that situation. And it's a natural, I mean, you're already pre-programmed and anchored into that state, that excellent state. Damon, hi there. Does NLP have a certifying body? If so, do you certify? Cheers. It doesn't have a universal certifying body. And that's unfortunate because um, you have most of the programs I've seen or I've attended, they are participation certifications. So they don't really test your skills. Some of them will check role to make sure you showed up, and then they'll issue anyone a certificate as long as they showed up. They don't they don't really pay attention to if you have the skills or not. Um, I went to one training, and I'm not gonna say the person's name, but believe me, if you know anything about NLP, you know who this person is. You didn't have to show up to the training at all. You could enroll, pay your money, show up on the end of the last day, and on a table, your certificate would be there. They did not test my skills. They did not even check to see if I showed up. None of those things. So when you have all institutes all over the place doing all different things, and some institutes have a 3-day practitioner training or a 1-week practitioner training. There's no way you can learn NLP in 3 days or 1 week. So okay, and I don't wanna say that there's no institute is doing it really well. I'm sure there are some institutes out there that really test their people, and before they hand out a certification, they make sure the person has the skills and has the competencies. I'm sure those exist. But when that person who comes from that institute can say, I'm a certified NLP practitioner," and then the other person who just printed their certificate off the internet, who it was a 3-day course, and they call themselves an NLP practitioner, it just makes it all null and void, if you ask me. So no, I don't do certification programs. When I teach the live NLP practitioner course, which was 24 days, I offered the students if they wanted to go through a rigorous testing, me testing their skills, I would do that. And if I found that they had all the competencies and the skills, then I would hand them a certification. And that's always my offer. But here's the thing, I wouldn't focus on certification. What does certification really mean? To me, it means nothing. If a person tells me I have a master practitioner and a master trainer certification, I just go, okay. Like, that doesn't tell me anything about their skill. I can usually tell just by talking to someone for 5 or 10 minutes if they really understand NLP and if they've got the skills. So certifications don't really mean anything. Don't focus on that. Focus on how to use NLP in your life to create the life that you want. How do you really master your life? How do you take charge of your life and create your destiny? That's what your NLP skills are there to do. And that's the focus. And that's better than any certification you could get from any place. The certification is how you certify your life in creating the life that you desire. All right. Anybody else before I get off? So check out, if you look in the description, you'll find the link to the ultimate online NLP practitioner training. Click that link. It'll give you all the details. There's 8 modules, and it describes each module, and there's also the bonuses, and I describe each bonus. The After the practitioner training, how to practice NLP skills, well, you'll know because the practitioner training it has all the exercises in it. And so that's for you practicing your skills. The great thing about the online training is you can do it as many times as you want. Now, when I first started training in NLP, I was attending live trainings, and I knew after my first live training that that wasn't enough, that I needed more. I feel like I really knew NLP. I knew that was going to come with more and more practice, and of course I practiced more, but I ended up going to more. I went to 3 practitioner trainings, and I had to pay for them. The great thing about the online training is you can take it as many times as you want and not have to pay anything additional into what the first payment is or the tuition. So you can and that's what I recommend is just keep going through the course, keep taking it. And then after you do that for a while, it just becomes ingrained in you. Having a business card saying that you are certified by a mentor would be good to have. I'd like to help others, but I feel that I would not be taken seriously without. I mean, as far as NLP goes, I don't no one has ever asked me for my certification. I've probably been asked if I was certified, but most of the coaching clients I get have never they're not even interested if I have certification or not. Yes, the mentorship definitely helps. I was mentored by Steve Andreas for years before he passed away. And I guess that gave me some clout if people knew who Steve Andreas was. And to me, was a, I mean, he's a legend. He was the best NLPer, if you ask me. And I was very, very fortunate to be mentored by him. But before that, I had coaching clients. Before I met Steve, I had coaching clients, and people didn't really ask about my certification. It's just not something that comes up. And I have like a folder that's a stack of certifications like that, and I could put them all over my wall and make it look, all professional and good. But I would go against my honest, sincere belief that those certifications really don't mean anything. It's if you want to see certification, it's the life that I live, and it's not that I live some sort of extravagant life. It's just that I live the life that I want to live, and I'm happy and I enjoy my life. All right. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I try to be as candid and legit and honest and upfront because I don't want to waste your time. And as when you become my student, I don't want you to waste my time either. So let's do this thing. Let's all make each other better. Let's all take these NLP skills and really create the life that we want to live. Okay. Any other questions before I get off? Any questions about the practitioner training? You want to get in by Sunday if you want to take advantage of all of the bonuses and the early bird pricing. You'll save $300. Okay. I think that's it. All right. Well, thank all of you for being on. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. And or if you just have any comments, any other, tell me how NLP has changed your life. I'd love to hear those stories. All right. Take care, everybody.